What's up, EduGamers? Today, we're looking at using board games to support hybrid learning or homeschooling. I'm joined by Danielle Dabbs today, and this is our first ever videocast episode of Board Game with Education. So let's get into the conversation. BoardGameWithEducation.com is a community and online store focused on leveraging board games for learning. So check out our selection of curated board games for learning. We have games like the one behind me, Wingspan, another one called Design Eye, which teaches you elements of graphic design. We have also our board game design kits, Unforgiven, a game about the Lincoln assassination trial. A lot of great games. Check it out. We also develop resources for some of these games too. These are additional resources that you can use to pull learning objectives from these games to use in your classrooms or at home. Again, BoardGameWithEducation.com. Now let's get into that chat with Danielle. All right, so today I'm joined by Danielle Dabbs. I'm super excited to have you here. I was just telling her I don't have kids, so I know a lot of our listeners and a lot of people in our community do have kids, and we always chat about like games and board gaming, but it's always good to have someone on that's a parent using games at home with their kids. So Danielle has an Instagram account, and that's kind of how we connected. I saw her post. She was on another podcast, Homeschool Together, right?
Yes.
And I would suggest checking out that episode, especially if you are going to dive into games for at home learning. There's a lot of awesome stuff there, but I'm excited to chat with you. Danielle, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to do this. And so my husband and I have been playing modern board games for probably about 2 decades. They've always been really important to us and to our relationship, our social life, and then now how we interact and teach our kids. So I'm a mother of 4 kids. So you have none. I have a lot. If you want to borrow someone, you're welcome to a few anytime you want.
That's
So
professional.
their age is 18 months to 8 years old. So that's a full-time plus job. But I also have a master's in social work and have spent almost 15 years, not 50, I'm not that old, working in low-income schools, both running after-school programs, and then now I actually grant write for school supplies for kids in those
Awesome.
schools. But because of my background, education to me has always been kind of about finding those interesting and unique ways to teach kids. So the teachers were, doing their thing during the day, but for some kids they didn't connect with that. So we would use like drumline or theater or stepping to engage them in education in a different way. So when it came to my own kids, I was always trying to teach them like through more experiences and hands-on learning, and that has included a lot of games. And even though my husband and I were really involved in hobby board gaming for a while, we were struggling to find games that we enjoyed playing with our kids. So we had those terrible traditional games like Candyland and Chutes and Ladders, which everyone's familiar with, or we were trying to force them into like entry-level hobby games. We're like, oh, these are easy, they can play those, but they're just either too long or too complicated. So we did a lot of research and found there was like an entire world of fun family games and games for kids. So we started our Instagram account for that, just to kind of share what we've learned with others. And it's been really fun to connect with other people who are using games to learn, and for this crazy season too, where so many people are at home a lot more than they used to be.
Right, right. Yeah, that's awesome. And I have a question I'm going to throw at you. I didn't prepare you for this. So, you
Okay.
mentioned Candyland and oh man, like Shoots and Ladders.
There's some
Do you have
ladders,
like
yeah.
one game you would say, hey, before we get into like actually chatting about why games are important, but what would be one game that you would recommend to someone to check out if they only know those 2 games?
So I would say like a substitute for Candyland is Hoot Owl Hoot, which is the exact like same mechanics of like drawing a color card and moving it forward to the next color, but it's cooperative and it has an end in sight. Like Candyland, I'm either stacking the deck or hiding cards so that I don't end up going back to like the cupcake or something.
Right.
So I think that's like a great substitute. If you're like, oh, but I really want to play like a Candyland type game with my kid, I would choose Hoot Owl Hoot by Peaceable Kingdom instead, because it is the same educational components, but way more fun and way
Yeah.
faster.
Awesome. I haven't played that one. I don't know if I've heard of it either. It's Hoot Owl Hoot, like
Hoot Owl
the
Hoot.
bird
Yeah,
or
it sounds
the
like a
animal?
very preschool game.
Okay, cool.
But it actually like does kind of tailor up too, because you can help kids like choose, which color they want to pick to move based on which one's further. So there is like some number
Mm,
comparisons. So even though it's like really, really basic, for my child who knows her colors, I've moved her up to doing that kind of interaction with it, which helps them grow with it.
right, right, and that corporation aspect is kind of just there's those skills of communicating just at a really basic level, even in a game like that for younger kids.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned you were in the board game hobby. How did you? Because eventually, I think we will have kids, and we are huge into the board game hobby. How did you kind of integrate teaching and learning with the board game hobby with your kids?
So we had initially kind of started out choosing like playing games with our kids more to just teach them those basic skills like cooperation and working together. Um, but we've realized that there's so much they can learn through games that is more educational. So we like when the pandemic happened, we're in like a totally different situation than we were a year ago too.
Right.
So we now have kids who are learning at home for a significant chunk of their time, and I can kind of talk about what our situation looks like. But we have a child who's in second grade who is doing hybrid schooling. And so that means she goes to school 2 to 3 days a week. And then the other days, she doesn't even get online with a teacher. She's just doing like 2 hours of homework.
Oh, okay.
So when she started doing that in spring, we realized that some of the stuff she was doing with school was just very frustrating for her. The computer program was like really difficult as a first grader to figure out how to click through,
Mm.
and worksheets are super boring for her. So one of the things we started playing constantly was Sleeping Queens. Are you familiar with that game?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Would you mind
so that was
just quickly sharing an overview?
yes, and I have it right here.
Gotcha.
So this
Right
is this
on
is like
top.
one of my favorite because it's like one of the ones that really got us into thinking differently about using games with our kids and not just like to teach them taking turns and winning or losing.
Right.
But you're you have queens in the center and you're trying to wake the queens up using kings to wake the queens up. And there's like power cards that let you put the queens back to sleep or steal a queen or something like that. But one of the ways you can change in your cards is by making addition equations.
Mm.
And so you have number cards, I think 1 through 9. It's 1 through 9 or 1 through 10. And so you can change in as many numbers as you can add to make an equation to total one of your other cards. So if you like have a 1 and a 9, you can turn in those with your 10 card and get 3 new cards from the deck trying to pick up power cards to wake up your queens. So we started doing that instead of her online math
Mm.
program that she had to do because she was just tortured by that. Like it was like you had to click it as fast as you could, and she was panicking about it. So she ended up just doing a lot more math. We'd play round after round after round of Sleeping Queens. And so from that, it was just like a light bulb going off. Like, why are we not finding games that like so many games, especially addition? Like you can't, throw a rock without hitting a game that uses addition. Like even the games
Mm.
my husband and I play, we're doing all the addition at the end for our scoring. So unless you're cheating and using an app, but we don't let the kids do that.
Yeah.
So we knew that like lots of games had some of those components, and then we started like trying to find more games that were more educational, but still fun, and trying to like balance that out for them. So now it's just like such a part of our family culture. Like the kids just constantly pick games that's off the shelf. I use it to teach my other child preschool. And that's kind of how we transitioned into like, we're not, we're playing games constantly for different
So,
reasons.
I guess so you have a uh I guess son daughter in preschool, and then you have older kids, and so I'm assuming you're using different games with those kids, but then maybe sometimes you're playing games together. How do
Yeah.
you kind of how do you manage that?
So when my older two are, so, okay, so we have a second grader who's in hybrid school, and then our kindergartner is in part-time kindergarten, which looks exactly like hybrid school. It's the same. He
Okay.
goes two full days a week, and that would be his normal schedule, like without the pandemic. But on the days he's home, he has no assigned work. So he is just free as bird, can do whatever he wants. But to me, I'm going to keep them busy, and I'm always about like, we're going to learn. I mean, like, I don't want to hit him over the head. Like, I do not pull worksheets out for my kids ever, but I'm always trying to teach them, like with baking, or, you know, when we used to go out, we'd go to the zoo and go to the science center and things like that. We just can't do that anymore. So,
Mm.
so I use games a lot for him for that. And then my preschooler, we really try to play like preschool games on the days when they're at school. And then I have an 18-month-old who I'm basically just like, please don't die. Like, just keep yourself occupied, like
Right.
dumping out marker bins and stuff like while we play. Or I put him down for nap and then we'll play. So in sometimes I'm just like picking a kid who's specifically playing for a specific reason, like particularly with my preschooler. I have like 3 or 4 shelves of games that are just her like preschool schoolwork games.
Okay.
And so I don't use a curriculum for her. I just use books and games pretty much. And so she and I will just play a lot of those like games that are kind of like a little too young for my older kids now. Like, they'll play and sit and play like an easier Peaceable Kingdom game, but they're not excited about it. They'll just do it like if they're bored. So she gets kind of those games more when it's her preschool time, and that's usually when the older kids are gone.
Okay.
The older kids, we play a lot like when the other two are at nap or quiet time. So they have like a specific set of games that are too old for my 4-year-old. So I have a 8-year-old, 6-year-old, 4-year-old, and 18-month-old. And my 6-year-old and 8-year-old are pretty much at the same level. Like, our 6-year-old, I don't know if he has always been this way or just because of games, he's caught up. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
we had no idea what he was capable of. And when we started playing Sleeping Queens, he picked it up instantly. Like, I would have never thought in preschool he was going to do addition equations. But because he was exposed to it with the game and wanted to play so hard, he played so much. He would have, play open handed. We'd help him. But within a couple rounds, he was picking it up because he just wanted to keep up with her. So
awesome.
He's been like excelling. Like, he's at least a grade level ahead on everything now because of playing with her and playing games that are more tailored to her. So, and then one of my goals this year has kind of been like to find games that they all can play together, because that is like the sweet spot. And sometimes that's our 4-year-old being the helper. Like, we played Dream Home the other night, and she was the one who like picked up a card and put it in my house. So she wasn't playing on her own, but she was playing on my team. And then sometimes she's the dice roller, and then sometimes she legitimately can't play. Like, she also is like pushing herself to do things that are older than her like normal capabilities, I think, because she wants to keep up and be doing what they're doing.
Right. And I'm trying to think of some games that are, I mean, maybe like a year or two down the road, where you have the oldest being the one that's kind of, I'm thinking of like Mysterium, if you played that, or
We just got that from the library, actually,
okay,
but we
yeah.
haven't played
So
it yet.
like, where there's like the one person that's kind of the quote unquote game master, but I mean, the other players have a lot of unique choices. But I'm trying to think of if there's any game. Can't think of one off the top of my head, but there's that one player that's kind of the one that's the captain of the board game, I suppose, where everyone else has smaller kind of roles and they're working together. Um, yeah. So
So,
what are
so I think our older kid, our 8-year-old, though, I think she's going to be playing like a lot of more of these modern board games that we play sooner, because a lot of the games that we play with her also are teaching them mechanics. So like, we're also like looking at like, okay, this is like a family strategy game, but this teaches you all the mechanics. Like, when you're playing Forbidden Island, you're learning all the mechanics for Pandemic. So like, they're familiar with, a tile laying, like a polyomino laying in Haba's Tiny Park, and then they can play Barren Park from that. So like, I think that the jump to some of those like older games, and even they're playing some that I thought were going to be just for my husband and I, and now they play them because they see us playing and we're like, okay, give it a try. But yeah, one of the games I was going to share actually do you play Quacks of, is it Quedlinburg? I don't know how
Oh
you say
yeah,
that.
yeah. I
Um,
really like that
we
game. Yeah, that's
we
actually,
bought
I
that
think I'll
for
have that
us.
too. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we bought that for us to play, and they saw it and thought it was a Harry Potter game and wanted to play. And so they've been like amazed, like they're actually better at it than I am because they're like they're less afraid to push their luck.
Yeah,
Where
right.
I'm like always like I'm
Maybe.
really like, I'm not gonna go, I'm gonna hold, and they're like, oh, let's give it a try. So they end up doing better. But that one has like amazing amounts of addition and subtraction because they're constantly adding their cherry bombs to see if they're gonna, bust their pot, explode their potion, and then
Yeah.
when they have to buy ingredients, they have to like figure out how many points they have and how much they spent and how much they have left. So like they're playing games that games that we like wouldn't think they would be playing right now. They're starting to play those because of like starting them at the family game level, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's another topic too, is like game mechanics or type of like, I guess, Lexus. You have to learn some of those game mechanics before you can move on to new ones. Because Quacks of Quinlanburg is pretty, I would say it's like a medium weight game. I don't know if I would introduce that to a friend of mine that's never played some modern board games. So that's awesome.
I think I think if we had tried to like play this with my 6-year-old when he hadn't played any games, he wouldn't be able to play it. But because we've like scaled him up through a lot of different, and we like have to help him with the math still. Like he can't do the subtraction, 24 minus like 12 or something. He doesn't figure that. But it's great for my second grader. I'm like, this is like the best math you've been doing like today.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome.
So,
So, are there any games that you use that you look at content specifically, and whether it's tying it into things they're doing in school or just something that you kind of decide to do on your own and kind of teach content through?
so I actually have like we have our Instagram, but then I did like start a blog website just to like keep track of it for people who weren't on Instagram. And so I do like try to group our games on there by content. So like when you
Okay.
go to look at K through third grade, it should have like all the math games together and then all the reading games and geography. And we're not very good at having science. We need to get more science games. I know you have a lot of science games. I need to do more of that. But so for math, obviously, like that's a huge area of like that. There's so many games. Like almost every game is easy to incorporate math in it, but we have a lot of games that I use like for specific mapping. So a couple of them, I do have like a stack of games around me if you want to see all my games for
Sure.
ideas
Yeah.
for things. But so for preschool, I picked 2 games that are kind of like more basic about teaching just rolling the die, number recognition, counting. So one-to-one correspondence, like being able to count the number of spaces that you're moving. So one that we do with my preschoolers, like Unicorn, Glitter Luck by Haba. And this one's really just like 1 to 3, like counting up to 3. So it's a really basic one to start with. And then there's Counter Chickens, which is the same type. It's a spinner, but you're also just doing one-to-one correspondence. But this one can go up to like 10 or so. So those are 2 like preschool math games that I use a lot to connect. Like I want her to not just identify numbers, but be able to do that one-to-one course where she's counting the spaces that she's doing, which is what a lot of like younger kid board games are doing. But these are just a little more interactive and a little more fun. Like they're not super fun, but they're a little more fun.
Yeah.
And then for the older kids, Sleeping Queens I already talked about, which I just love that one. We do some game donations, and that's one I like give to schools and everyone because I just think it's super easy to learn and fun to play, and it has the addition component. But then we've been turning it into subtraction lately too. So we'll just say the subtraction equation when you do it instead of addition. Another like content game for math that I use a lot is Clumsy Thief in the Candy Shop. And this one is adding sums up to 20. So you're making like piles of candy that add up to 20, and then you're stealing piles with your card. So like if somebody has a pile that has 15 on top and you have a 5 card, you can steal their pile with your 5 cards. So our kids love this game. Like it is so clearly educational, like it's not even hiding it at all because it's sums of 20, but it's so interactive and they like have so much fun
Yeah.
stealing and then like putting the robber on it and locking the things. So um, locking the stack. So we play that one quite a bit for math, but they don't think it's math. Like they just think it's
Mm.
super fun. Have you played Click?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one too.
So this one too, I'm like, it's a super, great game for adults and kids, but this one has been great for doing the 2 number die adding. And then this one we
Yeah.
actually play virtually with grandparents too. So like this is
Okay.
one that we gave them a set and we have a set and they can roll the dice and tell us what they have. And so that's been good because they
Awesome.
don't always want to play with me either. Like sometimes it's nice to break it up and have someone more fun to play with the
Yeah.
grandma.
Yeah, and those are
Um,
good games for like virtual roll and writes or flip and
yeah,
writes for
yeah.
virtual
And
experiences.
then
Yeah.
I think the game that's been like our math MVP is a game called Money Bags. This is like as content based as it gets. It's teaching coin
Money.
names, coin value, and then adding coins. So
Mm,
I don't know what it is because again, it's like one of those ones where you're spinning and moving, and then you're adding up. It tells you like how much money you're supposed to make with the coins, and then you spin a spinner to see like if you can't use dimes, you can't use nickels, and you have to make that amount of money out of the coins. Um, our kids think it's like the most fun game. Like they don't think of it as an educational game. They think it's so fun. And I'm like, I don't know if it's because they like all the fake money, if they feel like they really are
yeah,
getting
really.
money. But they want to play it all the time. And it is single-handedly responsible for teaching them coins and how to add them. Like again, my kindergartner now knows all of his coin names, all of their values, and can
Oh wow.
easily add money. And my second grader is just being introduced to that in school. So
Okay.
like this game is like my MVP of like
Yeah, that's
specific
awesome.
content teaching. So those are the math ones, and I talked about Quacks a little bit, which I really like for that right now.
Yeah.
Um, for reading, I mostly use a lot of reading stuff. It's easy to find games for preschoolers for reading, and it's
Mm,
more like learning to read, like learning letter names and letter sounds. So we
right.
just use like a basic like ABC bingo for
Okay.
that. And this is a Peaceable Kingdom game too, which like it's just there's just such like high quality that I like having those because I know like too if I lose a piece, they'll send me pieces for free.
Mm,
And they do that with all their games, which is perfect when you have preschoolers who are
yeah.
throwing pieces everywhere.
Loose pieces. Yeah.
And then like this is a classic, but
Mm,
sequence letters, like everybody. So we use that one for learning
oh,
letters and
cool.
letter sounds. And then another, again, these are probably in my like, I don't know if these are my most fun games that we have. They're definitely more like educational content based, but because I'm teaching her preschool, I kind of have to do that too. And
Right. Right.
so
Yeah.
then there's like, this is based on the show, the ABC Super Y, the
Okay.
CBS show. Um, so that ones are like preschool letter games or reading games. But then I think like once kids are older, we have not found a good amount of like helping struggling. A lot of people ask me like, well, what do you use
Mm,
when
yeah.
they're past that? They know their letter names, they will know their letter sounds, but they can't quite, they're still not reading or they're like a reluctant reader, like they just refuse
Mm,
to read.
right.
And for those, I think the one game I recommend usually is a game called Kids Create Absurdity. And this is
Okay.
like it's a small business, so they're like a family company, but they are similar to like a card. It plays similar to Cards Against Humanity, but it's
Okay.
very very clean. Like I took out like maybe 2 cards from the whole thing, and I've read a lot about the different versions of the game, and I don't think
Mm,
they're all quite that clean. But
yeah.
my kids like practice reading those because they have to read the cards to pick what they want. So they're reading like Silly String or
Mm,
like Ice Cream Sundays or Coloring on the Wall. So like they have to read the card to play. And I think that's something that like people don't necessarily always think about. Like
mhm.
pick a game that has like cards with a little bit of reading on it. Like we just got King of Tokyo, and those cards have like just a little bit of text about like what the power you're purchasing on them is,
Yeah.
and that's
Right.
about
Right.
that's what our new reader is working on reading those. So he's like reading the game because he wants to know what it can do. So we kind of just, instead of just reading it for him, we push him to be like, well, can you figure out what it says? And I think that's an area like that people, want a reading game in particular. But when you get past learning to read, there's not as much for like practicing reading. But if you take those card games where there's, deck builders or things where you're having to read stuff on the cards, it helps them just reinforce that. And they don't, like, a lot of reluctant readers won't push back on it because
Right.
it's something they want to do and it's fun. It's not like
Yeah.
you're making me sit here and read a book or fill out a worksheet or something.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
It's I mean it's those fantasy worlds are very, engaging. And I mentioned before we started talking is I have a student that I tutor in Taiwan, and before I left Taiwan to come back to LA, I bought him some like gifts, and I got him he loves Pokemon, so I got him Pokemon, Pokemon like the encyclopedia book. So of
oh yeah,
course
yeah,
he'll read that in English because
yeah,
It's Pokemon.
yeah. So there's tons of like games that have stuff like that you just find what
Mm,
your kid's interested in, and
right.
they'll read that stuff because they want to know what it says.
Right, right,
But
right.
I think sometimes like kids are very intimidated by books too, and
Mm,
like just a large amount of content, a large amount of text that's on a page. Where if you're handing them a card with just like a sentence or two, it's less intimidating to, and a lot of them have like repetitive words on them because different cards will do similar things. So I think that that's just a way we've started to like incorporate practicing reading with games.
right, right.
Um, and then I have a couple geography games too. If you want to
Oh,
hear all these games, I'm
yeah, yeah,
literally you
yeah.
can see there's a bunch behind me, but I didn't even pull half of them off. But so this one I use for like younger kids, Scrambled Up Space. So it's based on a book which they know and they read in elementary school, which is nice.
Mm,
And the reason I like this is because it's not like an entire map. It comes with a map of the US, but you're not playing on a map board, which is kind of different, but you're looking at the states on cards. So you're actually looking at each state's individual shape, which I think is just helpful to
mm,
kind of be able to
okay.
recognize the state by shape. And then a lot of times they're looking to see on their map, like comparing, like, okay, well, where is this on the map? Because does it touch a river, or does it, like, because you have to match it to the right, like, clue card or whatever it is.
Mm,
And then even my young, like, that's a game that I can have our 8-year-old, 6-year-old, and 4-year-old play because my 4-year-old can do the cards where it's like, which state matches a color. And we just don't race in this one. Like, it's
mm.
supposed to be a racing game, but we
Oh,
just
okay.
modify it to not be racing. So she can like find one that starts with a certain letter because she's doing letter identification. And then the other one I like for older kids. This one I like. Our second grader can play this, but I do think part of that is because she's like played Ticket to Ride and played trekking the national parks. But we just got
Mm,
trekking the world this year, and that
cool.
this one has been really great for geography because it's one of our only ones that has a world map. Like almost
Mm,
every single geography game that we play is based on a specific concept. Like any Ticket to
yeah.
Ride, it's like one specific, except for
Mm,
I guess Rails
nice.
and Sales, which I've never played, so I can't
Yeah.
say speak to that
Yeah,
one. But
that's true. Most map games are based on like a region, right? It's not
mhm.
really world based.
So I
Yeah.
like that one because like they can see the whole world, and then they're like picking where they want to go. And we don't have a ton of science games, so I'll have to leave that to somebody else. But we do have. We've been playing this one a lot lately, which is when all 3 kids, my 18-month-old can play,
Oh,
is
okay.
playing it. And so
Yeah.
that one we just introduced like habitats and then
Mm,
the animals in them. But the cool thing about that one is it's got like the 3-dimensional uh, planets, and you have to put the tiles on them, and then you're reading your habitats like around the edge. Like you have to count up your habitat squares, and you have to
okay.
rotate it. And so it's just like a completely different way of thinking when they have to count their habitats because they're counting them in 3D and they're rotating
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
thing to do that. So those are all my like. I think that was a lot. Sorry.
Yeah, no, no, that's okay. Those are
But
some
those are
good
all games
good
that I use
suggestions.
like for specific like content connections and stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would say one science one maybe that is definitely for your 6 or 8-year-old, and the 4-year-old might need some help, is ecosystem.
Okay.
Essentially, it's like a king domino where
Oh, okay.
putting things in a grid, but then you're trying to place different animals next to each other based on how they interact within an ecosystem in the real world. It's not
Okay.
like super tied into like real life ecosystems, but it's like if you put a bear next to a fish, you get points. If you put
Oh, yeah,
uh
yeah, they'd love
yeah, like a fox away from the wolves, I think you get points. I don't know the exact
okay.
animals and stuff, but
Yeah, I've seen that one, but I haven't played. We just tried Evolution Beginnings, which is like
mm,
kind of predator prey interactions.
yeah.
That one did not work super well for us just because you have to eat other people's animals and like destroy all their stuff, and they were not super excited about like someone killing their animals every single time.
Yeah.
So we're just gonna hold off on this one. But I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
you have to like know your kids too and know what works for them. Like
Mhm.
some kids can
Yeah.
only play cooperative games because they can't stand to lose. Like,
Right.
so, you know,
Right.
you got to scale them up to what they're able to do and are interested in doing.
Right. Cool. So do you have anything else to share maybe before we head into our game?
There were two. I, one of the things I just wanted to talk about that wasn't content based, like kind of that other learning that you learn from games,
Yeah.
were a couple of games. I think everybody knows, like, you know, cooperative games help you learn cooperation, working as a team, problem solving and stuff.
Mm.
But I think those are great. But one I wanted to mention, two I wanted to mention too are Dinosaur Tea Party. Have you heard of
Oh,
this game?
no, but
So
it
it's
looks pretty
basically
cool.
it's Guess Who with cards, um, and so it's a deduction game, or like you're not a social deduction game. It's just a deduction game where you're trying to figure
Mm.
out like is who each person is. But the thing I love about this game, which I don't think people think about in board games a lot, is like because it's this tea party, you play with silly accents. And so
Okay.
our kids are like acting in it, which like again, not something you connect to board games, but I think
Mm.
there's lots of games out there that can do more than you think they can do if you interact with them in the right way. Like any game that you play can be educational, or you know, the kids can learn from if
Right.
based on like the way you um, talk about it, or the questions you ask when you're playing. So I don't know if
Yeah.
there's anything else I see.
So you had one more or just the
Oh,
dinosaur tea party?
uh,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm sure you've played a version of Codenames.
Yeah, but if
I
you want to share maybe for
I
someone who
cannot play
hasn't.
real Codenames. I do not like just the letters, but this one is pictures, so it's basically like Codename Pictures, but with Disney
Mm.
movies. And this was another one that I like picked up, and I was like, "There's no way." I mean, I know it's Disney, but I just didn't think our kids could really play it,
Mm.
just because it was maybe too abstract for them to figure out like our clues and stuff. But they have been amazing at it. And the thing that surprised me about this game is the connections that they can make. And my 8-year-old can now like be the caller. Like she can
That's
sit there and
awesome.
look at the cards and come up with the connections even better than I can. So I just think it's cool when there's games that you're like, I don't know if they'll be able to do this, or they'll be able to think in this way when they're that
Right.
young. And I think that's a really fun one to help them think differently than just like, you know, linearly.
Right, right. Yeah, it's I don't know. I love code names and I like to try to get as many like I like to be the caller and like to give like crazy like 5 and try to get
Yeah,
them
I
all
can't do
connected.
that.
I mean, I'm
Like
not very
literally,
good at it, but I just enjoy see
that's
if
why
I
I
can
need
pull it off.
that's why I need the pictures, because I'm like blue.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like clearly my daughter is significantly more creative than I am.
It's awesome.
But
Cool. All right. Well, we're gonna move into our game. I mentioned we're gonna play 5 second rule. This is the first time doing it. Was usually I've done it on the podcast and we've done audio, so I can like really
okay,
edit things and kind of figure it out. But we're gonna try to do it on the fly video
okay.
here. I'm gonna share my screen so you
You may have
can.
to cut this part.
If you're not familiar with this, or if anyone's watching, essentially, I'm going to give you a category, and you have to name 3 things in that category within 5 seconds. I
Okay.
think I have 4 categories or 5 categories, so we can see how many you can get out of 4 or 5. The first one's very easy. But I don't know if I should say that because if you don't get it, then you might think the other ones
You shouldn't
are
say
too
that
hard.
because I'm not very good at. I'm under pressure of these things. No, I'll be okay. I should get my 8-year-old. She'll be better at it.
So maybe animals.
Okay, giraffe, zebra, elephant.
Awesome. 1 point. Famous singers.
Celine Dion, Mariah Carey, Britney Spears.
2 points. Things you put on pizza.
Sausage, pepperoni, cheese.
I think maybe I'll give you that one because I kind of screwed up in the hesitation. So 3 points, and then we'll go on the food you eat at a barbecue.
Hot dog, hamburger, chips.
Ooh, 4 points. Last one, board games.
So the Catan, Ticket to Ride, and Good Island.
I think you missed the most important one.
It's so too long to say.
Yeah, you chose some long board game titles. That's funny.
No one listened to me. Don't do anything. I had all of these things here. I was so excited. There's too many.
Yeah. Anyone watching maybe hopefully could have pulled some off, but
those are
awesome,
long
Danielle.
games. It takes like a second.
Yeah, it took like the board games with the most syllables, I think. Awesome. So Danielle, thank you again for coming on and chatting. I'll put your Instagram up here again, but if you want to share anything that you're working on, I know you have like a donation program too, and then your Instagram or wherever you want people to connect with you.
Yeah, we just really want to encourage people to give games to kids who might not have exposure to games like this. So if you find a game that you like playing, we just want people to donate that to like a local school or local, foster families or things like that. So we do have on our Instagram and like my bio in the links 2 nonprofits that we partner with that have like a game wish list, one for teachers in low-income schools, and then one for foster families, and then like group homes, so kids who can't be in a foster family for a variety of reasons but are in the foster care system. So and then any money that like we get through any affiliate clicks we use to buy board games, because we just think these are such amazing teaching tools that are being underutilized, and they would really help some kids connect to some of this educational content in a way that maybe they can't in traditional academics, or especially to in foster families, being able to connect as a family and play games but still learn in there too, we think is important. So that's what we just try to do with our account.
Awesome. Really cool. And then your Instagram, just Board Game Babies. You can reach out to Danielle there. She posts some awesome reviews, and that's how I found her, was through Instagram. So thank you again for coming on, and thank you for being our first, I don't know if it will be the first video cast episode that comes out, but being the first one that recorded. Super excited for that. So thank you.
Thanks for testing with me.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening in this week. If you liked what you heard, be sure to let us know. You can find us on social media as Board Gaming with Education or BGE Games, or email us at podcast@boardgamingwitheducation.com. If you want to support our podcast, be sure to check out our support page on our website. As always, teach better, learn more, and most importantly, play more. Thank you for listening, and until next time.